We think we know what we are buying when we pick up a pack of ground beef. We do not. The ground beef sitting in American refrigerators right now is sourced from multiple countries, blended across dozens of carcasses, and processed through supply chains most of us have never heard of. The label tells us almost nothing. The law does not require it to. We investigated 10 of the biggest ground beef brands and retailers in America. Every sourcing claim, every recall file, every ownership trail, 10 brands ranked worst to best, a full verdict board, and a 60-second protocol before we ever grab another pack. Let's get into it. Brand 10. Walmart Great Value, the blended mystery in every pack. When did we stop asking where our beef actually comes from? Great Value. Ground beef is one of the most purchased proteins in America. The price makes it an automatic grab for millions of families every single week. It sits in the meat case looking identical to every other ground beef package on the shelf. Same red color, same plastic wrap, same nutrition label format. Nothing on the front of the package suggests that what is inside came from multiple countries across multiple continents before it arrived in that case. Here is what the label does not tell us. Great Value ground beef is sourced from a blend of beef imported from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Mexico, combined with domestic beef in ratios that are never specified on the packaging. A regulatory exemption to country of origin labeling requirements, known as COOL, allows blended multi-origin beef to avoid disclosing the individual countries contributing to the mix as long as the product undergoes processing on American soil. The package can say product of the USA while containing beef from 4 different countries, legally, without any obligation to disclose the blend. That blending happens at large-scale processing facilities that aggregate trimmings and cuts from multiple international suppliers into a single uniform product. The more sources in the blend, the more animals contributing to any single package. More animals in the blend means a wider contamination surface in the event of a pathogen entering the supply chain. Cook a Great Value patty on a cast iron pan over medium-high heat. The fat renders out quickly and in significant volume. The patty shrinks noticeably. What is left is smaller and denser than what went in. The beef flavor is flat, generic, nothing that would identify a specific breed, diet, or region. That is the texture and flavor profile of a heavily blended commodity product doing exactly what it was designed to do. For families feeding children ground beef multiple nights a week and trusting that the Walmart name means adequate sourcing oversight, the multi-origin blending reality is a conversation worth having before the next grocery run. The label says very little. The sourcing says everything. The next brand is controlled overseas, and most of us have never heard the name behind it. Brand 9. National Beef, the American label with a Brazilian parent company. How many of us have bought what we thought was American beef and sent the profits directly to a Brazilian conglomerate? National Beef is one of the largest beef processors in the United States. It operates major processing facilities across Kansas, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. It supplies ground beef to retailers, food service operations, and institutional buyers across the country at a scale that places it among the top 4 beef processors in the American market. The name reads as domestic. The ownership structure tells a different story entirely. Marfrig Global Foods, a Brazilian meat conglomerate headquartered in São Paulo, holds a majority ownership stake in National Beef. Marfrig is one of the largest beef producers in the world by volume, with operations spanning South America, North America, and Europe. The acquisition gave Marfrig direct access to the American domestic beef market through an established processing infrastructure that most American consumers have never connected to a foreign parent company. National Beef products reach consumers through retail store brand labels rather than under the National Beef name directly. This means the beef processed through National Beef facilities appears on shelves under supermarket house brands and regional labels that carry no indication of the processing origin or the corporate ownership sitting behind them. We buy the store label. The money flows to São Paulo. Brown National Beef sourced ground beef in a skillet. The color development is even. The texture is consistent with standard commodity ground beef. Nothing in the cooking experience distinguishes it from any other mid-range commodity product. That consistency reflects the industrial scale of the processing operation rather than any distinctive sourcing quality. For seniors on fixed incomes who choose domestic-looking store brand beef specifically because they want to support American agriculture and keep their food dollars in the country, the foreign majority ownership sitting invisibly behind familiar retail labels is not a minor detail. It is the thing they were trying to avoid. The name reads American. The ownership does not. The next brand's recall record is the largest in this entire category. Is it possible the beef we think is American has never actually been American at all? Subscribe so we always know who is really behind the label. The ownership trail runs overseas. The next brand's safety record runs even deeper. Brand 8. Cargill. 36 million pounds and a salmonella standoff. What does it take for a ground beef recall to reach 36 million pounds? It takes a supply chain so large and so interconnected that by the time a contamination source is identified, the affected product has already moved through distribution centers, retail cases, and home refrigerators across 18 states. That is exactly what happened with Cargill in 2011. Cargill is one of the largest privately held corporations in the United States. Its beef processing operations represent some of the highest volume ground beef production in the country. In 2011, a Salmonella typhimurium outbreak traced back to a Cargill facility in Springdale, Arkansas, triggered a recall covering 36 million pounds of ground beef. At least 79 people across 18 states were sickened. The strain identified in the outbreak showed resistance to multiple antibiotics, meaning standard treatment was less effective and recovery more complicated for those infected. The scale of that recall is worth sitting with. 36 million pounds is not a contained facility problem. It is a supply chain architecture problem. When a single processing facility handles enough volume that a contamination event generates a recall that size, the concentration of production creates a risk surface that distributed smaller-scale processing would not produce. Cargill beef reaches consumers through store brand labels across multiple major retail chains. The Cargill name does not appear on the package. The processing facility origin is not disclosed. We buy the store label, and the sourcing history behind it remains entirely invisible unless we go looking for it. Press a raw, Cargill processed patty between two fingers before cooking. The texture is uniform and dense in the way that highly processed commodity ground beef consistently presents. No variation, no grain. The kind of consistency that reflects high-volume mechanical processing rather than anything resembling small batch or careful sourcing. For pregnant women whose vulnerability to salmonella infection carries significantly elevated risk of serious complications, a processor with that recall volume and that antibiotic resistance profile is not background information. It is the most important fact about the product. When the brand name never appears on the package, how are we supposed to know what we are actually buying? Hit subscribe and never shop blind in the meat aisle again. The recall defined the processor. The next brand's sourcing trail raises a different kind of question entirely. Brand 7. Kroger. The domestic label hiding a blended origin supply chain. When a package says product of the USA, does that mean the cow was born and raised here? Not necessarily, and Kroger's store brand ground beef is one of the clearest examples of why that distinction matters. Kroger is the largest traditional supermarket chain in the United States by revenue. Its store brand beef program operates at a scale that makes it one of the most purchased ground beef products in the country. The packaging is clean. The label reads confidently. Nothing about the presentation invites the question of where the cattle actually came from before the beef was processed on American soil. The cool exemption changes everything. Under current USDA regulations, beef that is imported from foreign countries and then processed domestically can be labeled as a product of the USA. The cattle can be born in one country, raised in another, and slaughtered in a third. As long as the final processing step happens on American soil, the domestic label is legally permissible. Kroger's ground beef supply chain draws from multiple international sources, blended at domestic processing facilities, and packaged under a label that gives no indication of the animal's actual origin. For heart patients managing their diet carefully and choosing domestic beef specifically because they believe American farming and feed standards are more tightly regulated than international alternatives, the blended origin reality sitting behind a domestic label is a meaningful gap between expectation and fact. Cook a Kroger store brand patty on a grill pan at medium-high heat. The fat renders at a moderate rate. The patty holds its shape reasonably well. The beef flavor is neutral and consistent, nothing distinctive, nothing that identifies a specific sourcing, origin, or breed characteristic. That neutrality is the signature of a blended commodity product where the goal is consistency at scale rather than quality at source. Sodium runs around 75 milligrams per 100 grams in the unseasoned product. The fat ratio varies across the product line from 80% lean to 93% lean, with no sourcing differentiation between them. The domestic label is legal. The domestic sourcing is not guaranteed. The next brand's fat content tells an equally important story. Brand 6, 73 to 27 commodity blend. The fat ratio that works against us. Has a ground beef ratio ever told us more about the sourcing than the label ever would? The 73 to 27 fat ratio is the cheapest cut available at retail. It exists at the bottom of the ground beef pricing structure because it is built from the lowest grade trimmings recovered from multiple carcasses after every higher value cut has been removed. The fat content is not a flavor choice. It is a sourcing consequence. At 73% lean and 27% fat, this blend delivers more rendered fat by volume than usable protein per serving when cooked. A standard quarter-pound patty going into the pan loses a significant portion of its weight as fat renders out during cooking. What is left is nutritionally less efficient per calorie than any leaner blend on this list. The fat that renders out carries with it whatever fat-soluble compounds were present in the animal, including residues from conventional feed programs and any fat-stored hormones present at slaughter. Cook a 73 to 27 patty in a skillet without draining. The fat pooling around the patty within the first 2 minutes of cooking is visually significant. Drain it, and the patty has visibly shrunk. The eating experience is rich in a way that reflects fat content rather than beef quality. The flavor is more intense than leaner blends, but the intensity comes from fat saturation rather than muscle meat quality or breed distinction. For diabetics managing caloric density and fat intake across every meal, and trying to find a protein source that delivers maximum nutritional return per serving, the 73 to 27 blend is the most inefficient option in the entire category. There is no brand name to examine here, no corporate parent to trace, no recall history attached to a specific label. Just the economics of commodity beef. Processing producing the cheapest possible product from the least valuable available raw material. The price reflects the sourcing. The sourcing reflects the priorities. The next brand surprised us most on this entire list. What if the cheapest brand in this ranking actually outperformed 2 of the 3 brands in our title? Subscribe and share this before the next grocery run. The fat ratio told the whole story. The next brand rewrote our expectations entirely. Brand 5, Aldi, the discount retailer that outperformed its price point. Title brand. Did we expect the cheapest retailer in this ranking to beat 2 of the 3 brands named in our title? We did not. That is exactly what happened. Aldi operates on a business model built around radical cost reduction at every level of the retail experience. Smaller stores, limited SKUs, no brand name products competing for shelf space. The savings generated by that model get passed directly to the price. Aldi ground beef is among the least expensive in any market where Aldi operates. The Never Any product line sits above the standard Aldi ground beef offering and carries a no antibiotics ever and no added hormones claim. That claim is backed by third-party supplier audits conducted at the farm level rather than relying on self-reported compliance from suppliers operating without external verification. It is not a facility inspection system, but it is a verification layer that neither Walmart Great Value nor Kroger's store brand program applies to their standard ground beef supply chain. The standard Aldi ground beef draws from a blended multi-origin supply chain similar to what we saw with Walmart and Kroger. The cool exemption applies here as well. But the Never Any line separates itself from the standard offering with a sourcing commitment that is documented, audited, and publicly disclosed. Cook an Aldi Never Any patty alongside a Walmart Great Value patty at the same heat and timing. The Aldi patty renders less fat, holds its shape more consistently. The beef flavor is cleaner and more present. The textural difference is noticeable enough that a side-by-side comparison makes it difficult to argue they are equivalent products at different prices. For families managing a tight grocery budget and trying to find a ground beef option that delivers meaningful sourcing accountability without requiring a move to premium pricing, the Aldi Never Any line is the most surprising value finding on this entire list. Sodium runs around 65 milligrams per 100 grams in the unseasoned product. The discount price delivered more than we expected. The next brand takes sourcing accountability to a different level entirely. Brand 4, Laura's Lean Beef, the American family farm answer to commodity beef. How many ground beef brands can actually name the farms their cattle came from? Laura's lean beef can. And in a category where blended multi-origin supply chains are the norm and sourcing transparency is the exception, that ability is more significant than it might initially appear. Laura's lean beef sources exclusively from American family farms operating under a documented no added hormones standard. The brand has maintained that commitment since its founding and publishes its sourcing criteria publicly without requiring a Freedom of Information request or a regulatory filing to access. The cattle are raised on American soil from birth to harvest. No international blending. No cool exemption being applied to obscure a multi-origin supply chain behind a domestic label. The nutritional profile reflects the leaner sourcing model. Laura's Lean operates primarily in the 92% lean to 8% fat range. That ratio delivers more protein per calorie than any commodity blend on this list and produces significantly less rendered fat during cooking. For athletes tracking macronutrients and trying to find a ground beef option that maximizes protein return per serving without arriving loaded with excess saturated fat from a low-quality trimming blend, Laura's Lean is the clearest mainstream answer at the conventional retail level. Cook a Laura's Lean patty in a cast iron pan at medium-high heat. The fat renders at a noticeably lower rate than any 73-27 or 80-20 blend. The patty holds its shape cleanly. The beef flavor is present and identifiable in a way that reflects a consistent single-origin sourcing model rather than a blended commodity profile. The color development is even. The texture has genuine resistance. Sodium runs around 60 milligrams per 100 grams in the unseasoned product, among the lowest in the conventional retail category. Laura's Lean is independently owned and has resisted acquisition by the major commodity beef conglomerates that dominate the rest of this ranking. That independence is part of what has kept the sourcing standard intact. American farms, honest label, real transparency without a premium price barrier. The next brand takes the grass-fed conversation to its most complete form. Brand 3, Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed, the only beef that never saw a feedlot. What is the actual difference between grass-fed and grass-finished, and why does it change everything about the beef we are eating? Most beef labeled grass-fed in the American retail market spent time in a feedlot. Cattle can be raised on pasture for the majority of their lives, transition to a grain-based finishing diet in a feedlot environment for the final months before slaughter, and still legally carry a grass-fed label under current USDA guidelines. The finishing period is where the nutritional profile of the beef changes most significantly. Grain finishing increases the omega-6 fatty acid content, reduces the omega-3 content, and shifts the fat composition away from the profile that makes grass-fed beef nutritionally distinct from commodity alternatives. Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed is grass-fed and grass-finished from birth to harvest with no grain finishing period at any stage. The American Grass-Fed Association verifies that claim through third-party farm inspections with documented criteria that go beyond USDA minimum requirements for the grass-fed label. No feedlot, no grain transition, pasture from the first day to the last. That distinction produces a measurably different fatty acid profile. The omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in lifetime grazed beef sits significantly closer to the ideal balance than any conventionally raised or grain-finished alternative. For heart patients managing inflammation and cardiovascular risk through dietary choices, that ratio difference is not a marginal nutritional detail. It is one of the most meaningful single-ingredient swaps available at the retail level. Cook a Thousand Hills patty, and the fat renders differently than commodity beef. Less volume, slower rate. The beef flavor is deeper and more complex, slightly mineral, distinctly different from the neutral profile of a commodity blend. That flavor complexity reflects the varied pasture diet and the absence of a grain finishing period that would standardize and flatten the taste profile. Sodium runs around 55 milligrams per 100 grams, the lowest of any brand in the conventional and premium retail segment on this list. The grass-fed label means more here than anywhere else in this aisle. The next brand adds a quality scoring system the rest of the category has never matched. Brand 2, Certified Angus Beef, the 10 specification standard every other brand ignores. What would it mean if most of the beef sold under premium labels in America failed to qualify for the most rigorous quality standard in the domestic market? That is not a hypothetical. It is the reality that the Certified Angus Beef program was built to address. Certified Angus Beef is not a brand in the conventional sense. It is a quality certification program with 10 documented specification requirements that every carcass must meet before the label can be applied. Those specifications cover marbling score, carcass size, maturity, hide color, and several additional quality markers that together ensure a consistency of eating experience that commodity ground beef programs do not attempt to deliver. Fewer than 30% of Angus cattle presented for grading meet all 10 specifications. The majority of beef produced in America cannot carry the label regardless of breed. The program is owned and operated by the American Angus Association, a producer organization, rather than a corporate conglomerate with an incentive to expand the certification as broadly as possible to maximize volume. That ownership structure keeps the specification standard intact in a way that a privately held brand with investor pressure towards scale might not maintain. Blind taste tests conducted across multiple years and multiple independent panels have ranked certified Angus beef ground beef above every commodity and store brand alternative in the category for flavor, texture, and overall eating quality. The marbling specification is the primary driver of that result. Marbling delivers fat distribution through the muscle rather than around it, producing a more flavorful and more texturally consistent eating experience than trimming-based commodity blends can achieve. Cook a certified Angus beef patty on a grill or cast iron surface. The fat distribution produces even browning across the surface. The patty develops a crust that commodity beef rarely achieves. The interior stays moist. The beef flavor is distinctive and present in a way that immediately separates it from everything ranked below it on this list. For cancer survivors rebuilding their relationship with food and looking for a beef option that delivers genuine quality and a clean domestic sourcing standard, certified Angus beef answers both requirements simultaneously. The 10 specification standard changed what premium means in this aisle. The next brand removed the retail supply chain entirely. Brand 1, Butcher Box, the beef that never touched a retail supply chain. What if the entire problem with ground beef was not the beef itself, but every hand it passed through before it reached us? Butcher Box was built on that question, and the answer it arrived at was to remove the retail supply chain entirely. Butcher Box operates as a direct-to-consumer subscription service delivering 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef, sourced from farms with no antibiotics ever and no added hormones at any stage of production. The beef moves from farm to processing facility to insulated delivery box to our door without passing through a distribution center, a retail meat case, or a blending facility that aggregates product from dozens of international sources into a single anonymous package. That supply chain model changes everything about what is possible in terms of sourcing transparency. Butcher Box publishes its farm sourcing criteria publicly. The grass-fed and grass-finished standard is verified through third-party audits rather than supplier self-reporting. The no antibiotics ever commitment applies at the farm level and is documented through the supply chain rather than applied as a marketing claim with no verification mechanism behind it. The direct delivery model also eliminates the retail markup that forces every other brand on this list to make ingredient and sourcing compromises to hit a price point that survives supermarket shelf competition. Butcher Box passes the cost of premium sourcing directly to the consumer without a retail intermediary taking a margin that would otherwise require cutting corners somewhere in the supply chain. Cook a Butcher Box ground beef patty, and the difference from commodity beef is immediately apparent. The fat renders cleanly and in lower volume than any conventional blend. The patty holds its shape without the structural collapse that heavily processed commodity ground beef produces. The beef flavor is deep, complex, and distinctly identifiable as coming from a specific sourcing model rather than a blended anonymous origin. For seniors who have spent decades buying whatever ground beef was on sale and absorbing the sourcing consequences without knowing it, Butcher Box represents the clearest available answer to every question this ranking raised. Sodium runs around 50 milligrams per 100 grams, the lowest of any brand on this entire list. No retail supply chain, no blended origin, no anonymous sourcing, just beef that knows exactly where it came from and can prove it. The verdict board: Walmart Great Value, avoid. National Beef, avoid. Cargill, avoid. Kroger, approach with caution. 73 to 27 commodity blend, avoid. Aldi, never any. Buy with awareness. Laura's lean beef, buy. Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed by Certified Angus Beef by Butcher Box, the clear winner, 10 brands. One category, one honest answer. The 60-second buyer protocol. Before any ground beef lands in our cart, we check 5 things. 1. Look for country of origin disclosure. If the label says product of the USA but lists multiple countries in the fine print, we are holding a blended import product in a domestic wrapper. 2. Check the fat ratio. Anything below 80% lean is delivering more rendered fat than usable protein per serving. 3. Look for a third-party verification mark. No antibiotics ever means nothing without an external audit system confirming it. 4. Ask whether the grass-fed claim includes grass finishing. If it does not specify grass-finished, the cattle likely spent their final months in a feedlot. 5. Check the sourcing model. Direct-to-consumer means fewer hands, fewer blending facilities, and a shorter contamination surface between the farm and our kitchen. The ranking proved one thing. The label tells us almost nothing. The sourcing tells us everything. 10 brands. One meat case, a sourcing system designed to keep us buying without asking questions. We came in thinking ground beef was ground beef. We are leaving with something more useful. A case file. Walmart, National Beef, and Cargill built their model on volume and anonymity. Kroger and the commodity blends filled the middle with labels that promise more than the sourcing delivers. Aldi surprised us. Laura's Lean proved American family farms can compete on price. Thousand Hills and Certified Angus Beef raised the standard. Butcher Box removed the broken system entirely. Still grabbing the same pack without checking where it actually came from? Subscribe and share this before the next grocery run. The package looked simple. The sourcing never was. Now we know the difference. Stay sharp, stay healthy, and keep rising.